Carstensz is a really unique climb and expedition. It's kind of set in the middle of the jungle in Indonesia. So you need to fly to Indonesia. Typically people will fly through Bali, and then you typically fly into a small town called Timika. Most people nowadays are taking a helicopter into base camp. Cost really comes down to whether you're taking the helicopter or not. If you're gonna trek to base camp, that's a long, difficult trek, and it's also a dangerous trek because of kind of the human influences in that part of the world. Climbers being threatened by machetes, by some of the local tribes. So if you take the helicopter in, it's just a few hour flight into base camp, and you can set up shop there and be relatively safe. And then once you're at base camp, you spend a couple days acclimatizing before climbing the peak. There are several different routes that have been climbed on Carstensz, but overwhelmingly the majority of climbers take the same route, and that's a route that has fixed lines on it. So you send those lines all the way to the summit and back down. Carstensz is the steepest, probably most technical climb of the 7 summits. It's not necessarily the hardest, but it's often considered to be the most technical because it's a rock climb. It's not a traditional alpine glaciated snow climb like you find on a lot of these other peaks like Denali and Elbrus. So, you need to have kind of that rock climbing skill set, and you need to be okay with exposure. There's one section on Carstensz, it's kind of this Tyrolean traverse where you're free in the air, kind of walking across this cable bridge. Ton of exposure, and you need to be comfortable with that. But in terms of how long it takes to climb Carstensz, you might spend a few days acclimatizing at base camp, doing some hikes around there, just getting used to the altitude. Everyone climbs the peak in a day from base camp to the summit and back down. No one camps out high on the mountain. But if you have bad weather, delays on Carstensz are a big factor. I know people that have waited in Timika for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, sometimes even more. No matter when you climb it in the year, you can get rain, snow, or you can get clear skies. So it's a peak that you can climb year round. But generally a climb of Carstensz will be about a week. So obviously, a lot of hiking with the pack, some good long days training is really important. But the most important thing you need for Carstensz is rock climbing ability. You need to be comfortable on steep, rocky terrain, so getting out there and training with a rock guide or something like that, being familiar with climbing fixed lines is super important. Certainly if you're doing the trek into base camp, you need specific mud boots, Wellingtons or something like that that's going to work, that's going to give you traction in the mud for long periods of time and keep your feet dry. You want to bring multiple pairs of gloves. Once one gets wet, you can toss it in your pack and toss a new set on. And also in terms of hanging out at base camp, again, it's very wet, so bringing a pair of rubber boots or something like that for kicking around. Environmental sustainability is very important in this unique environment that you're climbing in on Carstensz. And whatever you pack in, you pack out. We don't leave anything on the mountain. So any garbage we create while we're at base camp or on the climb comes back out with us, and human waste as well. Typically we set up a little bathroom tent at base camp with a little toilet setup. If we're trekking out or taking the helicopter out, that all comes out with us, and then we dispose of that properly back in Timika. And in terms of hazards, really the biggest hazard is exposure, not clipping into the fixed lines correctly. There's a bit of potential for rockfall. You can get some snowstorms rolling in, even a bit of lightning, but typically that's not a big hazard. It's more making sure you climb the fixed lines correctly, you're staying clipped in, and if you do that, it's generally a pretty safe climb.